I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess. If you are new here, welcome. I am a 6-year PhD candidate in English literature with a focus on Victorian women novelists. And as you might expect, I love to read. Today I have my July wrap-up for you. I was participated in Jane Austen July, hosted by Katie from Books and Things, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and Claudia from Spinster's Library. And I had a very fun time participating, although the first 3 books that I read are not for it. But I read 9 books this month, so let's jump in. As I said, the first 3 books were not actually for Jane Austen July, and the first book was a carryover from June. This is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, specifically the annotated edition done by Alfred Appel Jr. My cat is trying to steal my camera bag. Hold on. Stop! So this took me basically a month to read. I started it on June 3rd and I didn't finish it until July 7th. This was rough. Oof, this was rough. So I think I had talked about in a currently reading video that I was having a rough time with this. Mainly because of the subject matter. I think Lolita is infamous enough that I don't really need to introduce that. We are in the head of Humbert. Humbert, who is a vile, vile person. And it was uncomfortable. Now, I can acknowledge that Vladimir Nabokov is an amazing writer. This book is so well written. His writing is amazing. I can also acknowledge that what he's doing in a lot of this is way too smart for me. I'm not smart enough to understand that shit. There's all kinds of wordplay. There's just so much going on. So I was really happy to have the notes that explain some of that. Sometimes Appel's notes could go on a little long, but mostly I did find them actually really helpful. And so what I ended up doing is I would read a chapter and then I would flip to the notes and read the notes for that chapter. And I found that was a really good way to break up the experience of being in Humbert's head, because So yeah, I can acknowledge that this is a really amazing piece of literature. Humbert is an incredibly well-drawn character. Too well-drawn, you might say, because God, uncomfortable. So yes, an amazing work of literature. Did I like it? No. No, I did not. It made me feel so gross reading it. So gross. Like all the showers in the world were not enough to cleanse me of this narrator. So I gave this 2.5 stars. It was frustrating because there were parts I was very interested in, but what I was interested in was Lolita herself. I was like, if the book had been from her point of view, I think I probably would have liked it a lot more. Of course, it still would have been horribly depressing and awful, but at least I would not have to be in this man's head. Oh my God. I mean, being in Lolita's head would come with a whole other set of problems considering what happens to her. But I would not have to listen to this vile man. Like I said, an incredibly well-drawn character. Props to you, Nabokov, but also, ew. So yeah, I gave this 2.5 stars. I can admit it is a great piece of literature. I can even admit that it's too smart for me. I'm not smart enough to get half of it. But would I read it again? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Nope. 2.5 stars. Next, we have one that I read for my book club, and this ended up being not only my favorite of the month, but what is right now my favorite book of the year. And this is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. So I actually suggested this to my book club because I have heard so many people here on BookTube talk about it. This is a literary dystopian book following an unnamed narrator who, along with 29 other women, have been 29, I think. I think there's 30 of them total. I could be wrong on that. I read this at the beginning of the month. But they have been locked in an underground bunker, guarded by men who will not talk to them. They are not allowed to really show a lot of emotion. They are not allowed to touch each other. And they have been living a very, very miserable existence. That's all I'll say. This was amazing. Like, on one hand, there was so much more I wanted to know about the world. But I know that that wasn't the point. But some of the insights that Hartman had her character realize were just stunning. The writing was beautiful. This was originally written in French, and it was translated by somebody whose name I will look up. Roz Schwartz, who I think did a marvelous job. I actually want to get a copy in French and read it in the original language at some point. But yeah, no, I thought this was absolutely amazing, beautiful. Just beautiful, beautiful. What it means to be human. Like, the necessity of being able to talk to somebody. It's just gorgeous. It's a beautiful book, beautiful book. We had such a great discussion in book club about it. And I'm really glad I suggested it and that I finally picked it up. So yeah, this was 5 stars. It is currently my top book of the year. We'll see what happens in the next 5 months. Is it 5 months? I have no idea. Now after that was an audiobook, and this is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I had read one Taylor Jenkins Reid book before, One True Loves, and hadn't really been planning on reading any of her later stuff. There's like a very stark contrast between her early works and her later works, but I was convinced by a friend of my cousin's to read Daisy Jones and the Six on audiobook. And yeah, I get the hype now. This is fantastic. This is following a band in the 1970s, and they are having all kinds of drama. The lead singer, Billy, and Daisy Jones, the singer that they kind of bring in to make their album more dynamic, there is a lot of conflict between them. It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll is what this book is. And I had a wonderful time. The audiobook was absolutely fantastic. It's a full cast, like everybody has their own voice actor, and they were marvelous. There is a scene toward the end. It's actually 2 scenes, and we're skipping, like we're going back and forth between them, and they almost made me cry. The only reason I did not cry was because I was driving. And I was like, I cannot cry because that is dangerous. So do not cry, Elizabeth. Keep it together. And I did manage to, but it was a very close thing. So yeah, I just had such a great time with this book. I think that Reid does a really good job describing the music and the feelings behind the music. And I'm like, I want to hear these songs now. And like, I looked at the album for the TV show because they did a TV series of it, and meh. It wasn't what I was imagining, so meh. But you know, I thought this was fantastic, and I'm really glad that I picked it up. This was 5 stars. Now we finally get into the stuff for Jane Austen July. So the first was to complete the prompt of reading one of Jane Austen's main 6 novels, and this was the group read, Emma. I have read Emma several times before, and it is always delightful. It continued to be delightful. Mr. Knightley is my favorite Jane Austen love interest, as you might know from a recent video I did ranking them. Emma herself, I have actually come to really love. I think she is obnoxious as all heck, but she learns from her mistakes, and I can appreciate that. I also find the relationship between Jane Fairfax and Frank Churchill really fascinating because that whole thing is a mess. I would love to read a book from Jane Fairfax's perspective on this story. Are there any retellings that do that? Please let me know in the comments because I would love to pick one up. But yeah, I mean, Jane Austen is always 5 stars from me. So yes, it was 5 stars. And I think at the moment this is placed as my 3rd favorite Jane Austen book. Now, I was gonna do a whole ranking video. For several reasons, I didn't. One of those was I kind of didn't have time, unless I wanted it to be put out in August and not July. But the other was that I was watching other people's videos on various books. I watched Katie's video with her husband Nick on Sense and Sensibility, and I watched Claudia's video on Northanger Abbey. And I was like, and then that made me be like, it like made me question the order I had put the books in, or that I was planning to put the books in. And I was like, no, I can't rank them. It is very hard. They're all 5 stars. It's my favorite author, or one of my favorite authors. She's tied with Stephen King. And it is hard for me to rank these because I really love all of them. I feel like what I need to do to rank them is read all of them in a single year. So maybe that'll happen in the second half of next year. We'll see. We'll see. We might do a little Jane Austen project. But yeah, love Emma. 5 stars, naturally. The next book covered the prompt of read a work of nonfiction about Jane Austen or her time, and I picked up Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley, which I have had on my shelf since it was released and had not read it. So that needed to happen, and I loved this. So this is the 2nd biography of Austen I've read. Well, no, technically the 3rd, because I read 2 years ago her nephew James Edward Austen Leigh's memoir of Jane Austen, and then I've read one other modern biography by Claire Tomalin, and then this one. And I think this has been my favorite of, no, I know this has been my favorite of all of them. I really like Worsley's writing style. I think it's just very readable. Like, none of this was new to me because I had read the Claire Tomalin book last year, but I just really liked the way that Worsley told it. I gave this 4.5 stars. I liked how it was written, but it didn't like quite make it to that 5-star point where someone like Juliet Barker, who wrote the Brontes, or Heather Clark, who wrote Red Comet about Sylvia Plath. It like just didn't quite get there, but it was still so good, and I would recommend it. Apparently, somebody in the comments on another video said that there is some incorrect information about like the clothing. So keep that in mind. I know nothing about clothing of this era. That is not I don't really know much about clothing in general. So that is not my specialty, so I have no way of saying whether or not that's true, that there's issues, or what the issues were, or anything, but yeah, just keep that in mind. But I really enjoyed this, 4.5 stars. Okay, so now we have one last one that was not for Jane Austen July. And I have a physical copy here in my hand, but it's got a ginormous sticker on the cover, much like the last one in this series I read did. So I'm just gonna put it up here. This is The Big Four by Agatha Christie, and it is, what number are we on? Are we on 5? I think we're on book 5 of the Hercule Poirot series. This was a weird one. It's not so much a mystery as it is a thriller. It was almost like a James Bond movie, but with Poirot instead of James Bond. So a little goofier. In this, Poirot comes up against this organization, the Big Four, who are kind of like the Moriarty to his Sherlock. There's a lot of spoofing on Sherlock Holmes in this book, I noticed. Like I said, it's not your usual like cozy mystery, which I did find myself missing a little bit, but Poirot is such a delight to read about that I still gave this 4 stars. I did have a lot of fun. It was just weird how I was like, oh, suddenly we're in like a James Bond thriller. There's like explosive devices and all kinds of craziness. But yeah, it's definitely spoofing on The Final Problem by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as well as the follow-up to that one, which is The Adventure of something with a house. The Adventure of the Empty House, maybe? Hold on. I was right, The Adventure of the Empty House. So yeah, there's a bit of spoofing on that, as well as a few other things within the Sherlock Holmes canon, so that's fun. But not my favorite of the series, definitely. I'm excited to get back to the more cozy mystery style. Although we did have the return of Hastings, which is always nice. So I give this 4 stars. Next up was another Jane Austen July one, fulfilling the prompt to read something by her that is not one of her main 6 novels. And for this, I reread Lady Susan, The Watsons, and Sanditon. So this is a novella that she wrote pretty early on, and then 2 unfinished novels. One that she was writing in, I believe, 1805, when she was living in Bath and when her father died. And then Sanditon, which she was writing right before her death and never got to finish. I had read these back in 2017, I think it was, and I really did not remember much of them. I remember the general premise of Lady Susan and Sanditon. The Watsons was like gone from my memory. It just wasn't there anymore. So I'm really glad I got to pick this up. They are a lot of fun. They are kind of unfulfilling, I suppose might be the right word, because of course 2 of them aren't finished, and like they're really good. Like they would have been really good full novels. And then Lady Susan was written very early on, and it comes to kind of a hasty conclusion with like a rushed summary of the ending. So I ultimately gave this 4.5 stars. It's a delight to read Austen's writing, and I wish to God she had finished The Watsons, because that really... Also Sanditon though, because there are such interesting things going on in both of them. Like Emma Watson is supposed to reject Lord Osborne at some point, and I love a good rejected proposal scene. And then right at the end of what we have of Sanditon, she introduces this character, Miss Lamb, who is a mixed race heiress from the West Indies, which would have been so interesting to see how that plays out. Alas. Alas. And I've heard what the TV show did with Sanditon, and I want nothing to do with it. maybe that's bad. I didn't like the way I heard a certain love story ends. So, but yeah, 4.5 stars. Such a delight. Definitely one I will come back to, probably in another 8 years. Is that what it was? Something like that. And now for my 18th century novel project book, which was counting for the prompt of reading something by one of Jane Austen's contemporaries or thereabouts. And for this, I had The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith from 1766. This is actually referenced twice in Emma. And it was really interesting to read this and see some of the reasons why it was being referenced. I wonder if I can find the quote real quick. Here it is. Disproportioned friendships ever terminate in disgust. I thought, notwithstanding all his ease, this is Mr. Thornhill, the squire, who's their landlord, that he seemed perfectly sensible of the distance between us. Let us keep to companions of our own rank. Which, of course, is a big plot point in Emma with her relationship with Harriet Smith. So that was super interesting. I'm not going to say much about this because I will be doing a whole video on it. When that will be, because I haven't even filmed my June video on the female Quixote. But yeah, this is following Dr. Primrose and his family, who are very well-to-do, but then due to a sketchy banker or something, they lose their fortune and are reduced in circumstances. That's all I'm gonna say. This was like, it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I liked the story for the most part. I wish the characters had been more fleshed out. Like, I was like, you could have just been developing these characters more, but instead you're relaying this guy's journeys everywhere that really don't matter, and you're preaching for ages. But yeah, 3 stars. I didn't dislike it. I didn't love it though. And the final book I read counted for the prompt of reading a work of historical fiction set in Jane Austen's time. And for this, I picked up Miss Austen by Jill Hornby, which was recently made into a show that I do intend to watch. This is following Cassandra Austen, Jane Austen's older sister. And we begin in the year 1840 when Cassandra is an old woman. And she is on a mission to protect her sister's reputation. So we get the present day timeline of 1840, and then we flash back into the early 19th century. And possibly the very end of the 18th century. I don't remember particular dates. Yeah, we do. We go back to 1795 at one point. Okay. This was lovely. The main character here is Cassandra. Like, it's the main character is not Jane. It's Cassandra's story, but we do see quite a lot of Jane. It was especially fun having just read a biography of Jane Austen because I got to see all of these people who I'd been reading about already and kind of see them in action almost, or of course in Jill Hornby's version of them. But I thought that it was like, it seemed pretty spot on based on what I have read of from the biographies. Mary Lloyd was insufferable. Hornby did a great job with that. But yeah, this was really sweet. I enjoyed it a lot. I gave it 4 stars. So that is everything that I read in July, but I do want to talk about what I watched for Jane Austen July, which was Emma, the 2009 miniseries starring Johnny Lee Miller as Mr. Knightley and Romola, is it Gary or Garai? I don't know, as Emma. This is my favorite adaptation of Emma, and I had a lot of fun rewatching it with my husband, who actually loved it. So last year, I got him to watch Emma 2020 with me, and he really enjoyed that too. He actually liked this better, which I was not expecting. Now, I like it better. I think it's the more accurate adaptation. I like that it spends much more time on Jane Fairfax's story, which is like almost entirely cut from the 2020 film. But I thought that he was going to like the 2020 film because like the sense of humor in it is more modern, almost. I was thinking about doing a whole video on the differences between these two, but again, I ran out of time. Anyway, but no, he actually liked this one better, and I was just really happy with that. And I was like, yes! It's a win! I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I don't usually rate movies, but this is 5 stars. So that is what I read and one thing that I watched in the month of July. Let me know down in the comments. Have you read any of these? What did you think? What did you read in July? If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my bookish content. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.